We are called to forgive those who have sinned against us.
Sometimes we must hand it all over to you, O God.
We must forgive if we are to be forgiven.
Sometimes we must hand it all over to you, O God.
There are times when the hurt is just too great.
And in those times we must hand it all over to you, O God.
Please be seated in the presence of the Lord. If you keep up with the lectionary, this morning's readings are not those assigned. How many of you recognize it? Okie dokie. I can get up here and say anything. They're changed because there's a need to deal with forgiveness. What does it mean to forgive? There's been a lot of talk, news articles, things on TV, Facebook postings going around about Brett John, the brother of Botham John, the black man murdered by Dallas police officer Amber Guyger. That Brett John, the brother, hugged her. He forgave Amber Guyger for murdering his brother. I mean, he asked, after she was found guilty, he asked the judge whether or not he could go up and hug her, and she said yes. And even the trial judge, Tammy Kemp, also hugged her and gave her one of the judge's personal Bibles. And people were upset. Some were upset. They were more upset than, okay, that's okay. That's, it's okay. The fact that Guyger was convicted of killing an unarmed black man is unusual. That's a miracle in and of itself. Right? That just doesn't happen in this country. And the thing about it is, and I meant to look up where it happened, but it happened yesterday. It was at 2:30 in the morning, and the neighbors of this other neighbor saw that the door was open to the house. And they said, both cars in the driveway, and they're usually there, but the door is open, and I'm not sure. So could you go check? Could you go check? So the officers got there and saw movement in the house. The owner of the house, and killed her, shot her through the window. Wow. Shot her through the window. And the thing about it is that it comes a time, and I guess we've been so inundated that we might say, okay, another one, as opposed to getting outraged. The police kill unarmed black people with impunity, and folks get on with it and say, the police service protector, this is a difficult job. I'm going, you going to tell me? You going to tell me? And so, while I understand the job of police, I'm also a critic of police because I know what we're capable of doing. Amen.
Amen.
But black people are displaying forgiveness, forgiving people of horrendous acts against black people, and that is not all that unusual. Black mothers forgive the murderers of their sons. The family members of those killed in Mother Emanuel, South Carolina, forgave Bill and Ruth. Some of them, it was interesting. How many of you saw the documentary Emanuel? It was out during the summer. And so they're interviewing the family members, the surviving members, and there's a young man, and he was in high school, and they were interviewing him, and his sister was standing beside him. And so he was saying, well, I forgive him. I forgive him for murdering my mother. And the sister did. I'm not ready to go there. It takes people time to process what's going on. Black people are always forgiving other people who harm them. And that gift of forgiveness really has its genesis in slavery, where you had some of the enslaved who forgave their masters because they did not know what they were doing. Forgave them for holding them in bondage. And yet this particular incident with Malcolm John had social media humming. Why are black people always the first to forgive was the main question. What is it about us that we are willing to, they say overlook everything. We're not overlooking, but we are willing to say, I forgive you. And so as I read the conversations, there was confusion, there was anger. Why would John forgive the murderer of his brother? Why would he do that? And so finally, I weighed in, because here you have MacGyver, a trained police officer, who goes into an apartment, not her own, and kills the owner of the person who had a right to be there, right? And her defense team attempted to use what's called the castling law, the stand your ground law, that certain people, not all people, have a right to defend the space around them wherever they are. Okay? That's called the castle. Remember, a man's home is his castle. It's called the castle law. And they kind of carry their castle with them wherever they are. And they have a right to defend that space around them wherever they are. Her defense team argued that she had a right to kill a man, a human being, who was in his own apartment because she thought she was in her apartment. In forgiving Geiger, the brother said he did not speak for his family because his mother said, I'm not ready to go there. I'm not ready to go there. And it's okay. People come to forgiveness on their own terms. And so finally, I weighed in on Facebook and I wrote, through slavery, Jim Crow, lynchings, rape, spiritual, emotional, and mental trauma, continued discrimination and hate, we, black people in this country, have survived. And in spite of all efforts to prevent us from doing so, for the most part, we have thrived. I struggle with redemptive suffering. 4 years of seminary has not taught that out of me. I still suffer with redemptive suffering. However, it seems that even in the worst of circumstances, only by the grace of God are we able to forgive. Not saying we will forget, or that the person who is victimized will not be held accountable. Rather, we will not let your anger, your hate, your cruelty, your violence control us. That we turn over vengeance to the one who creates, the one who judges. Perhaps, just perhaps, we of Ebony Grace have come through all that is unholy, and we forgive to show the world how to be human. That we forgive to show the world how it is to be human. Because to forgive does not mean you will ever get over it. It does not mean that you will forget. Forgiveness does not mean that the one who is victimized will not be held accountable. Rather, to forgive means that you will not control me. That the harm inflicted on me will not control me. That I turn over your being held accountable to someone other than me. I will not do to you what you have done to me. That's what forgiveness is. And sometimes even the church gets that mixed up. That's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is about healing. And in forgiving the one who is victimized, the offender, that person does not even have to ask to be forgiven. They don't have to acknowledge your forgiveness. They don't even have to seek it. They don't even have to know you have done it. Because forgiveness is about me. It's about me healing. Me being restored. And yet there are times when the healing is when the hurt is so great, when the victimization is so great, that the only thing that can be done is to turn it over to God, because you can't even think the words, I forgive you. You can't even think, you can't get there. I know I should do that, but I'm not ready. So I'm going to have to turn it over to somebody else who can do it for me. As we look at this day that we are lifting up Luke the evangelist. Luke was a physician. Luke was about healing, right? Yes. Luke was a historian. And so we can get from our patron saint the fact that he gives us an example, as does Jesus, of how it is to be healed. Plus, he lets us know that history, our history is important. We're not going to forget that either. Because to understand the present, you have to understand the past. Yes. The past tells us about the present. And so this morning we want to remember that Luke was a healer and forgiveness is about healing. And then as we look at the Bible, you might think that the Bible is full of passages about healing and forgiveness, right? It's not. As we look at the Old Testament, God is always forgiving Israel because they're always doing something stupid, right? But you don't see a whole lot of interpersonal individuals forgiving each other. And sometimes we go to the story in Genesis about Joseph and his brothers, but that's more a story of reconciliation than it is about forgiveness. And so then we say, well, it's got to be in, if it's not in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, it's got to be in the New Testament, right? And there is something, because we know that in the New Testament, the focus shifts to Jesus as a perfect sacrifice, who replaces the old sacrificial system in the Old Testament of the doves and the rams and the scapegoat, right? And each Sunday we hear in the Great Thanksgiving, this is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Still, Jesus makes a point to tell his disciples that forgiveness is important. And he tells the disciples to forgive how many times? 70 times 7. And in what we call the Lord's Prayer, remember, we call it the Lord's Prayer. Jesus did not say, now we're going to say the Lord's Prayer. Right? We call it the Lord's Prayer. We hear that we are to forgive those who wronged us, and also those who owe us money, because it depends on which version. Right? Okay, trespass and debts. I'll take the debts. Give me my money back. And in every single one of the Gospels, there's an admonishment that if you want to be forgiven, you must first forgive. So if you want to be forgiven, you must first forgive. But then there is one text about forgiveness that seems to kind of help explain how black people are able to forgive the most heinous of acts against ourselves. And we usually hear it on Good Friday. Jesus has been sinned against. Jesus has been tortured, mutilated, falsely accused, convicted. He has been dehumanized. And while we know there are other times in Scripture where he says, your sins have been forgiven. Go and sin no more. From the cross, the place of execution or capital punishment, it is here that Jesus says, God, this one's on you. Right? He said, God, this one is on you. Because he says, Father, you forgive them. Well, they do not know what they are doing. He does not mouth the words of forgiveness to those who betrayed him, who locked him up, who convicted him, who took him to the place. He's up there and he says, this one's on you. Father, you forgive them. And we don't know if he didn't have the strength, didn't have the courage, just too tired, or it's just says, I can't do this anymore. Maybe it was his human side coming through and said, I got to take it to the Lord because it's not working here. Father, you forgive them because they have no clue what they are doing. And sometimes when we look at that part of Scripture, we say, oh yeah, they crucified and that. He's saying, no, it's more than that, because you are hurting your relationship. You have no idea what you're doing to your relationship between you and God. And so as we look at what black people have experienced and endured in this country, again, without any kind of help, as Dr. Joy DeGree writes in her book, Post-Traumatic Slave Disorder, it's really amazing that we are able to forgive it all. And so she writes, she says, you have to really put this in context. And though none of us are back there in slavery times, we read. But think about it. You have been held in bondage for your entire life, or even part of your life. And you have seen horrendous things. And then all of a sudden, you're free. And no one says, do you think you need some therapy to deal with this? Right? Nobody says, do you need some help? We know it's been rough. You have endured a lot. Even if you weren't enslaved, you had to be in fear that anybody could just take you and put you in slavery, right? And nobody says, do you need some help? So we come to discrimination and segregation and Jim Crow, and no one has said, you think you need to talk to somebody about this? Now today we do have therapy, but how many people are going for that PTSD, right? Because we do know that trauma is generational. And if you don't deal with it, it travels, and your children might not even think about it, but they are affected by how we are affected by how we have been treated in the past. And so we suffer in silence if we're able to admit that to ourselves. We suffer in silence because I don't want to deal with that. And the reason you don't want to deal with that because it's going to bring up stuff that you haven't dealt with. And we see black people cut down by the police, and it seems that no one cares. If things continue as they are, 1 out of every 3 black males will be affected by the criminal justice system in their lifetime. 1 in 3. And in her book, Breathe, Imani Perry, who's a professor at Princeton University, and she took the word breathe, the title, from Eric Garner, who said, I can't breathe. And so she explores the terror and the grace and the beauty of coming of age as a black person in contemporary America and what it means to parent our children in a vastly unjust world. And she challenges American society to see black children as deserving of humanity. Think about it. You have to tell people to look at our children and realize they're human beings. They're human beings, right? And so she was talking about her teenage sons and how it's difficult to breathe as a parent. And so at the end, people could ask questions or give their take on it. And I raised my hand and I said, my son will be 43 years old this month. I still can't breathe. I worry every time he goes out. Even though he's married. And I thought I could just turn him over to her. He's yours now. But he will call when he's leaving. I'll get a text, Mom, I'm leaving town. Mom, I'm back in town. Mom, I'm okay. Because there is this sense that it's there. I can't trust those who have sworn to protect my son. Okay. And so, because Botham Jean was murdered by a police officer, and there were those who did not want her held accountable, that she had a reasonable fear as she saw a black man coming toward her in his apartment, that she had a reasonable fear to fear him, to fear for her life, and that she should have been acquitted. Now, all she got, and I'm saying all she got, was 10 years for murder. 10 years. She'll be out in 5. Now the thing about it, that same week, a black man was convicted of assault on a police officer and killing a police dog. He got 45 years. He got 45 years. 45 years. So tell me black lives matter. Okay? And yet, in spite of all this, we are able to forgive those who sin against us. And sometimes we are able to say, as Brent John said, I forgive. However, most of the time, we need to turn it over. We need to turn it over to God. Jesus came on the cross. God, please forgive them because they have no clue what they are doing. Lord, I'm going to turn it over to you because if I get my hands on them, it's not going to be pretty. So we just need to turn it over. We need to turn it over. They have no understanding of sin. They have no understanding of how to be in relationship with one another. They have no understanding that every single being is a reflection of God's image. And when you harm a single human being, you have harmed God. They don't understand that. That they are destroying their relationship with God. And we don't even know if they have a relationship. I'm not sure. And then there's, again, this thing of redemptive suffering. And I try to go there. Because in the story of Joseph and his brothers, Joseph says, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. We got to talk. We got to talk about that. Okay? You meant it for good. And I'm not sure I can grasp how black people have been treated in this country as any good in it. Other than through it all, we have learned to forgive. That returning evil for evil is not the way of Jesus. I will not do to you what you have done to me. Even when the evil results in our death. Even when the evil results in our death. So to forgive doesn't mean that everything is kumbaya. You know how parents do, okay, John, and now shake it. No. No, I might get there, but not today. This means I'm releasing myself so I can heal. To forgive doesn't mean that there will ever be reconciliation. Because, and I want you, if you don't take anything else from this, some relationships are not meant to be reconciled. Some relationships are not meant to be reconciled. Okay? Paul was never reconciled with John Mark. Never. Abraham and Lot were not reconciled. So they say the Bible says, no, let me show you too where it wasn't. So not every relationship is meant to be reconciled, so don't force people back together. Now that you've forgiven, no. No. If it happens over time, that's fine, but if it doesn't, it's the way it's supposed to be, right? To forgive doesn't mean that the offender has to even ask or care about forgiveness, because it's not about the offender. It's about the offended. It's about the one who is hurt. To forgive is about healing, to become whole again, to be restored. And to forgive is not weakness. It is not weakness. It takes strength to forgive. It takes strength to hold back every fiber of your being that says, I know the Bible says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, but I think right now, vengeance ought to be mine. So it takes strength to forgive. And as God's sun-kissed people, we will take all that has been heaped upon us, to include death. And we will forgive. We will continue to forgive. And we will continue to forgive because we will show the world what it means to be truly human. Amen. Amen.